Hey, Andy here from buildahottub.com. In this video, we're going to look at whether we can build a hot tub from ICF blocks. So let's go ahead and take a look. Okay, so the very short answer is yes, you can build a DIY hot tub from an ICF block or an insulated concrete form. And in this video, we're going to look at how John from the UK is actually building his hot tub at the moment. So this will be the first in maybe a two-part or a three-part video series that will explore John's progress as he moves through all of the different stages with his DIY hot tub build. But before we get started, let's really explore what an ICF block or an insulated concrete form actually is. As you can see behind me, an insulated concrete form or an ICF block is a combination of insulation and rebar that's then formed into, it's almost like a Lego block structure. And what this does is it makes building very quick, very easy, and there's a whole bunch of advantages as well of using these insulated concrete forms, not only for hot tubs, but also for house building and for basement renovation, that kind of thing as well. So why should you use an ICF block? Well, firstly is the insulation factor. So built into these blocks is insulation, and you can see behind me the blue colour that you can see is actual it's kind of like polystyrene insulation, and it's on both sides of the block. The block itself internally has a rebar structure, it's hollow, and the whole idea is that once you've connected your blocks together, which you can lay very quickly and you actually lay them dry, you then fill them full of concrete. You have the structural integrity of a concrete pour, but then you also have the insulation properties of the blocks. So it does make for a pretty cool way of building, and it's quick, it's easy, and certainly for a hot tub, it's a great way of doing it because fitting the plumbing, rather than having to core holes out of the blocks, you're just cutting holes in polystyrene, so it's much easier to fit your plumbing into an ICF block built hot tub. Other advantages of ICF blocks, well, you've got the strength that we've mentioned already. You actually have some sound absorption, not that it really matters for a hot tub, but when you're building a house out of them, it's a great way of kind of soundproofing the structure as well. They've got some great environmental credentials in that a lot of recycled material is actually used in the creation of these blocks as well. Not that it's a big deal for a hot tub, but they are good for fire prevention. Really not a problem when you've got a vessel full of water. However, if you're building a house out of these, then I have read that they have really sort of long burn times, so it's good for fire prevention. And then finally, which is an important factor for our hot tubs, is they are great at deterring vermin, in that when you use insulation that isn't inside of concrete, it makes a very nice nesting place for our little four-legged friends. However, with the insulated concrete forms, there's no space for them. They're full of concrete, so it's perfect because there's basically no place for the vermin to actually nest, which is great for our hot tubs because unfortunately, damp, warm areas do attract vermin. So the ICF blocks just help us deter. Well, they don't really deter, but they're not a welcoming kind of environment for vermin. Okay, so we've taken a quick look at what an ICF block is. Let's jump in now and actually have a look at John from the UK's build and how he's getting on with his ICF block hot tub. So first of all, as you can see behind me, he needs to clear the area. We always need to clear the area. We always need to dig a hole, especially if we're building an in-ground one. And he's done just that. He's got a nice large digger in the background that you can see, which makes life a lot easier than doing it manually, as I did. If you've read the blog or you've watched some videos on the channel, I actually dug mine by hand, and it was back-breaking work, and it took me best part of 2 weeks doing it part-time. So with the digger itself, it makes life much easier, and I would definitely recommend that if you can get one onto your property. So once you've got that hole and you're ready to now start putting down the foundations for your concrete slab. So you're going to need somewhere in the region of 10 centimeters, 4 inches of either type 1 crushed rock or a ballast. They're all the same thing. They're very small pieces of rock that have been crushed down, and you then use a whacker to actually pound those level and into the ground. And what this does is it helps spread the weight of the concrete when you're going to pour that on top. Now what John's done is actually put an extra layer, and the black, they look like stones, but they're actually formed glass that has a really good R value, so it's an insulation value. And John's concern was he didn't want to put any of that foamed insulation into the slab, and I don't normally recommend that either because it can affect the strength. So he wanted to add some R value, he wanted to add some insulation, so having this foamed glass actually does that, and it has quite a good R value. I haven't seen this before, so it's a new one for me, so I always like to learn the new tips and tricks. Okay, so on top of that base layer, we're then going to add the membrane. So if you've read the blog or you've watched any of the videos here, the membrane itself isn't to keep the water in, it's to keep dirty water ingress out. So the last thing that we want is dirty water coming through the ground, coming up through the concrete into our hot tubs. So we put that membrane down just to keep the water out, so it doesn't really add any waterproofing at all in terms of keeping water in. It's only there really to keep water out. So once we've got the membrane in place, the next stage, as you can see behind me, is our ICF blocks, and these go in so quick. It's so easy, and it's just like putting large Lego together, and this is one of the big advantages of this kind of a system. Yes, it's slightly more expensive in terms of a building material, but it really is easy to create the form and create the shape ready for the pour. Now, I mentioned earlier, you're going to have to cut out, but you're only cutting through polystyrene in order to get your plumbing in there. So again, it's much easier than having to core holes out of block and then refill afterwards. You can do this with a simple handsaw or a simple hole cutter, and it's very easy to fit that plumbing into the form. Now on the pictures behind me, some of the eagle-eyed amongst you might have noticed that the bottom inner section of the form has actually been removed. So what John wanted to do was he actually wanted to pour a monostructure. So he wanted to be able to do the base and the walls in the same pour so that he didn't have any dry joints at all. This is a particularly good way of doing things as long as you can get your concrete guys to agree to it. Now, John mentioned to me that his guys, they weren't convinced it was actually going to be possible. And one of the challenges that they had was their mix was actually too thick. So they were struggling to vibrate it down through the walls when they did actually come to pour. However, before that pour, you've got to brace the structure, and you can see behind me here, there's the wooden structure is there to keep the forms in place. So those ICF blocks, whilst they go together nice and easy, they are dry joints, but also you've got to consider the amount of concrete and the weight that's going to go into them. What you don't want is those walls to bow in any way, so you're going to need to brace those walls, and that's what John did with his build, and you can see behind me here. So once all that bracing is in, you are ready then to have your concrete guys come in and do the pour. So once you're pouring that concrete, you do need to vibrate it down. So the vibrating down is to remove the air, and it's also to remove any gaps in the concrete itself. And as I mentioned earlier, John's mix, he said the guys had it a little bit too thick, and they got kind of 2/3 of the way through before they adjusted the mix, and it was much easier with a little bit more water added. It just made that vibrating process a little bit easier. Now, John did manage to achieve a mono pour, which is fantastic, so he'll have a beautiful waterproof structure there. Once you finish that pour, you need to leave the concrete to cure, and your concrete guys will tell you how long. It's normally around about a week to 10 days. Once that concrete has then cured, you're able to take away the bracing that's on the structure, And as you can see behind me, John is now left with a beautifully filled ICF Block hot tub structure. And this is the current state of play as of a couple of days ago. Now, John also mentioned to me that he couldn't find a great deal of information whether you could actually sort of tile directly onto the ICF blocks or anything like that. So what he's actually going to do is he's going to render it. He's going to then use he's actually using Ardex S7 as a sealing agent. Once he's got those two on, he'll be in I guess, more familiar territory in terms of having a structure that's ready to accept a grout and finishing tiles. And of course, I'll be doing a follow-up on John's build once he's moved on to the next stages and probably got some tiles in there. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next video. If you've liked this video, please do like, share and subscribe to the channel. See you on the next video.